Hello, everyone. Hola, Fernando. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you for sharing El Martir with us, which is another highlight in our Catalan Film Festival program, which we are very excited to share here. So, Fernando, you've kindly agreed to be here so that I can unpick your brain a little bit and ask you some things about your film, which has so intrigued me in so many ways. So, let me jump right in with a question about the narrative structure of the film. You know, El Martir is the story of two Syrian brothers who try to cross the border. They try to seek refuge in a Western country. And what is so interesting is you've quite intriguingly chosen to have the story of these two brothers narrated by their sister, who actually does not take part in the brothers' journey. So I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about this creative decision?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks a lot. I'm really happy to be part of this interview or this conversation. And I hope that everybody in the theater is enjoying the festival and would enjoy the film. So about the question, when I started to think on the project, the first thought was if I could make a film about this subject. So this was the first. If I'm allowed of making a film of this subject as a Western citizen, and the moral issues and how to find the ethics in the style and everything. So after thinking a lot, my answer, I replied myself like, of course, I can do it. Why not? But not in every way. Mm-hmm. And I can make a film about this because this reality affects me in some way. It's part of my everyday life. I think it's part of everybody's, the newspapers, or newspapers, the news, the media, the streets, people that you met. Everything is around us, and this affects a lot in our life. So why not? And I was very intrigued about, because I felt very stressed and thrilled and anxious about this subject. And so when I started to think about the story, first, thinking a lot, I was thinking about the distance. Like, mm-hmm. I'm here, they're there. So this idea of separating and thinking about the idea of the other, mm-hmm. It came a lot. And really quick to me when I started to think in the script. So, but at the same time, I started to think about in family too. And how the idea of the other, we live this idea in our family too. And we have parents, we have sisters, brothers, cousins, whatever, grandparents, and you always project yourself in this system. Mm-hmm. So I start to think in this dialogue about feel connected with something that is not part of you, but you're part of that at the same time. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I was thinking about how I can imagine a journey of these two Syrian brothers. Mm-hmm. So to help me to play like a fantasy of this journey, to not make a realistic journey, mm-hmm. I use the imagination and then I use a dream. And normally in all my films, I create a very thin frontier between reality and mental reality, like a mental pictures, but for me, are very real because it's part of our life. So, and always in some moment, these both walls start to cross each other, and you start to don't see where is the dream, where is the imagination, where is the memory, where is the reality, if it's happening, they're dying or not, is my desire, is my fear. So all of this emotional state helped me a lot to talk about intimacy. That for me at the end is the most important thing in this film. So mm-hmm. the sister allows me to, at the same time, the sister in this film, because we talk about religion and we talk about Islam, mm-hmm. The figure of a woman being outside about the action of praying, about be close, because all these men in the story, they are close to God in some way. They think that there is this God. At the same time, is the look of this sister, is the look of this daughter that mm-hmm. she's playing kind of like a God into her imagination. So mm-hmm. all of these ideas start to mix in my head, and for that reason, this structure helped me a lot to play all these subjects, all these ideas.
Very interesting. No, absolutely. I feel there's so much to unpack here, and you've really, what you've just said is very eye-opening in terms of this oscillation between closeness, separation, and how this is very powerful as a tool to create empathy, as you've just said. This acknowledgement that we're separated, but at the same time creating a connection, creating intimacy. And what you've said about the sister being a woman, and also this gender dimension coming into play here, is, I think, very powerful and gave this film a whole new dimension of meaning, which I felt was quite intriguing. Then, Fernando, moving on.
There's a thing about this. Okay, wait. But there's a thing about this entire idea that it's a very small thing, because it's a short film and I couldn't develop everything. But there's one moment in the memory when she's thinking about the childhood, and the two brothers are playing and fighting, and you have the father behind them, like supervising the whole act of fighting and the fact of being active persons. And then you have the daughter and you have the mother whispering, like, your role, your gender role is to protect them.
Absolutely.
So from the childhood, they already establish these paths in their lives, and they are not in control of that. So,
and it's so nice how this eventually, to some extent, reflects back onto the present of the film, sort of foreshadowing, paving the way for what later happens. So very powerful. So having talked about the narrative, let's discuss a little bit the form of the film, the style that you've chosen. And what I thought was so interesting there is that the camera in El Martí is quite static, and you combine it very interestingly, I think, with a 4:3 aspect ratio. So I was wondering, could you give us some insight into the visual style of the film? How did you and your team come up with the style, and what was important for you to get across with this style?
So the 4:3 aspect, it was I tried to find like a box, of course, idea. Because for me, I didn't care so much about landscapes. I didn't care so much about, there is bodies in the landscape sometimes, but normally it's about, my idea was to create words or concepts in the film. Like a hug is a hug, and I want to see a hug. I want to see a hand. I want to see feet. I want to see eyes. And I don't want to see all the connections or all the dynamism of the actions, because the dynamism of the actions, it's about the clash of these concepts, and I would love to create parts that they interact, because we're talking about this. We're talking about there is one reference in I really like the paintings of Morandi, and these objects that always separated, and you think about the relationship about these objects in the story. So how two hands in the past collide again with two hands in the imagination of the present, and at the same time with your handwriting, and at the same time with your eyes, and at the same time with a vase on a table. So how all of these are separated objects, like we are in life with families and friends and immigration and about politics and everything. We are separate things, but then things start to clash. So this idea of the box to underline this fact, like, this is a hack, nothing else. Yeah, it's out of context. This is a man praying, nothing else. What is that? Yeah. So one after the other, you start to build like a universe of separated things, and all together you can start to relate them. So this was the main intention, and the stillness of the shots. It's about the same. It's about creating ideas. Yeah. And I don't know how to say in English, but it's not like I didn't try to make metaphors at all. I didn't try to make symbols. I didn't try to. It's about feet and dust. That's all. It's about a fruit on the table. Yeah. That's all.
But quite.
And you start to have a relation with that.
Yeah. No, and I feel like, as you say, you may not try to create metaphors, but I feel like you leave so much room for interpretation and for letting the viewer's imagination read into things. That is quite beautiful. Like, you keep thinking. It's the film doesn't spoon feed you with obvious symbols and metaphors, and that is quite beautiful. And what you said about a universe of separate things, this is an idea I quite like, and I feel like it encapsulates so much of what your film is about. Separation in so many different ways, visually, emotionally, physically, and as you said as well. But then again, sort of these connections and networks that arise here. And as I said, both in terms of narrative and visually, I feel like you've kind of captured this so beautifully. And the more I watch this, the more I keep discovering, and I feel it's so beautiful how it's a film that asks more questions, or that invites me to ask more questions, that it gives me definitive answers, and very powerful. And Fernando, I'm so excited to see what is up next in your filmography.